I want to ask a question about the rules of how law enforcement is allowed to engage when feeling threatened, per your assertions. Because I want to show some video to you right now and ask, what is the appropriate response for the police officers in this situation? Those are law enforcement officers being physically attacked. By this standard, would any of those officers be justified in shooting and killing the people causing them physical harm?
Every single situation is going to rely on the situation those officers are on. But they know that when people are putting hands on them, when they are using weapons against them, when they are physically harming them, that they have the authority to arrest those individuals.
The president pardoned every single one of those people.
And make sure that they're getting justice for their actions going forward.
President Trump pardoned every single one of those people.
And every single one of these investigations comes in the full context of the situation on the ground. And that's one thing that President Trump has been so focused on, is making sure that when we're out there, we don't pick and choose which situations are and which laws are enforced and which ones aren't. Every single one of them is being enforced under the Trump administration, and the clarity of the law stands. And if people don't like it, these members of Congress and elected officials should go change the law and make sure they have that debate and policy change.
I just showed you video of people attacking law enforcement officers. Undisputed proof, undisputed evidence. And I just said President Trump pardoned all of them. And you said that President Trump is enforcing all the laws equally. It's just not true. There's a different standard for law enforcement officials being attacked if they're being attacked by Trump supporters. We just saw that.
This individual and these instances and these investigations all have to be taken and done correctly in context of every situation that is happening on the ground. So what we are doing today as the Department of Homeland Security is out there with our law enforcement officers, making sure that we're targeting the worst of the worst and that we're talking factually about each situation and making sure that we're bringing those perpetuators of violence back to justice, bringing them to justice and making sure they face consequences for their crimes. We'd love to have the partnership of Mayor Frey. We'd love to have the partnership of the Chief of Police and of Governor Walz every day when we're out there to make sure they tone down the rhetoric and they do the right thing for the people of Minnesota.
All right.
This week, Donald Trump called Renee Nicole Good a domestic terrorist who violently tried to murder a federal agent. J.D. Vance said anyone who disagrees is lying. Kristi Noem called it an act of domestic terrorism. But there's another American woman who was shot and killed by a federal agent during a confrontation. And Trump's response to her was very, very different. This comparison is about to expose everything. Let me tell you about two women. Both were shot and killed by federal agents. Both deaths became politically charged. But the way Donald Trump and the MAGA movement responded to these two shootings reveals something fundamental about whether they actually care about police accountability or whether they only care when it's politically convenient. First, Renee Nicole Good, January 7th, 2026, Minneapolis. An ICE agent named Jonathan Ross approached Good's vehicle during a traffic stop. And Ross did something unusual. He filmed the entire encounter on his personal cell phone. The 48-second video shows Ross holding his phone in one hand while shooting with the other. It shows Good appearing calm, saying, quote, "That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you." End quote. It shows Ross walking in front of her car while continuing to film. And it shows Ross shooting her while still holding that phone in his other hand. Good died at the hospital. Now, experts have analyzed this video. Jeff Alpert is a criminology professor at the University of South Carolina who specializes in police use of force. He said, quote, "Now that we can see he's holding a gun in one hand and a cell phone in the other, filming, I want to see the officer training that permits that." End quote. That's a rhetorical question. There is no training that permits one-handed shooting while filming on your cell phone. Because if you actually believed someone was a threat to your life, you wouldn't have one hand on a cell phone. John P. Gross is a law professor at the University of Wisconsin who specializes in self-defense doctrine. He said, quote, "If you are an officer who views this woman as a threat, you don't have one hand on a cell phone. You don't walk around this supposed weapon, casually filming." End quote. According to these experts, Ross's behavior is inconsistent with genuine fear for his safety. Their assessment is that his actions contradict the federal claim of self-defense. CNN created a 3D model using all available footage from the scene, and that analysis systematically debunked every claim the Department of Homeland Security made. DHS claimed Good was blocking ICE agents. The 3D model shows multiple cars, including Ross's own vehicle, drove around Good's SUV before the shooting. DHS claimed the agent was fearing for his life. The model shows Ross casually filming while approaching Good's vehicle and walking in front of the car. DHS claimed Good tried to run over the agent. The model shows Good appeared to turn her steering wheel away from Ross, not toward him. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey watched the video, and he said, quote, "Having seen the video myself, I want to tell everybody directly that is bullshit." End quote. The mayor of Minneapolis watched the same footage the federal government is using to justify this shooting, and he called it bullshit. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara confirmed Good was not the target of any investigation. She wasn't armed. She wasn't wanted. She was a community member monitoring ICE activity. Good's wife, Becca, was there. She was a passenger in the vehicle, and she sent something that captures the entire dynamic. Quote, "We stopped to support our neighbors. We had whistles. They had guns." End quote. Whistles versus guns. That's the asymmetry we're talking about. Renee Good was exercising her First Amendment right to observe federal law enforcement. She had a whistle. Ross had a gun and a cell phone, and he used both. So that's what happened. An ICE agent filmed himself shooting an unarmed woman who was sitting in her car. According to use of force experts, the conduct shown in the video does not align with self-defense training. The mayor who watched the video says the federal claims are false, and the evidence contradicts the self-defense narrative at every level. Now let me tell you how Donald Trump responded. On Truth Social, Trump wrote, quote, "The woman driving the car was very disorderly, obstructing and resisting, who then violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer, who seems to have shot her in self-defense." End quote. Violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the officer. That's how Trump described what happened to Renee Good. Even though the video shows she turned her steering wheel away from Ross. Even though experts say Ross's behavior proves he didn't fear for his life. Even though the mayor who watched the footage called the federal story bullshit. Trump called Good disorderly, obstructing, and resisting. He said she viciously ran over the agent. He justified the shooting as self-defense. Vice President J.D. Vance went even further. He shared Ross's cell phone video on social media and wrote, quote, "Watch this. As hard as it is, many of you have been told this law enforcement officer wasn't hit by a car, wasn't being harassed, and murdered an innocent woman. That is a lie." End quote. Vance is telling you that if you think Ross wasn't justified, you're lying. He shared the video that experts say proves Ross had no justification, and he's claiming that video proves the opposite. He's accusing critics of lying when they say Ross wasn't threatened, even though two professors who specialize in use of force and self-defense law both say Ross's actions are inconsistent with genuine threat perception. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem called what happened to Renee Good an act of domestic terrorism. She said Good was weaponizing her vehicle, attempting to run over law enforcement officers. She said the ICE officer followed his training. Domestic terrorism. That's the label Noem put on a woman sitting in her car while a federal agent filmed himself shooting her. So according to Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Kristi Noem, Renee Nicole Good was a domestic terrorist who violently, willfully, and viciously attacked a federal agent. She got what she deserved. The shooting was justified self-defense, and anyone who disagrees is lying. Now let me tell you about Ashli Babbitt. January 6th, 2021. The United States Capitol. A violent mob attacked the Capitol building, attempting to stop the certification of the 2020 election. Thousands of rioters breached the building. Over 140 police officers were injured that day. It was the first time the Capitol had been breached since the War of 1812. Ashli Babbitt was part of that mob. Video shows her with a group of rioters who broke through a barricaded door. This was not just any door. This was the last barrier between the violent mob and members of Congress who were being evacuated. The door had been barricaded. Officers were blocking it, and the mob smashed through the window. A Capitol police officer stood on the other side, weapon drawn, protecting the members of Congress who were fleeing behind him. The officer shouted warnings. He told the mob to stop. Ashli Babbitt ignored those warnings. She climbed through the broken window in the door, and as she came through, the officer fired one shot. Babbitt fell back into the mob. She died from the gunshot wound. The Department of Justice investigated. They reviewed the video. They examined the circumstances. They looked at the officer's actions and the context of a violent insurrection with a mob trying to reach members of Congress. And the DOJ determined the shooting was justified. The officer was cleared. No charges were filed. The conclusion was that the use of force was reasonable, given the violent attack on the Capitol, the breach of the last barrier protecting lawmakers, and the officer's duty to defend members of Congress. So that's what happened to Ashli Babbitt. She was part of a violent mob that attacked the United States Capitol. She broke through a barricaded door that was the last defense between that mob and members of Congress. An officer warned her to stop. She ignored the warning and climbed through anyway. The officer shot her, and the Department of Justice investigated and determined the shooting was justified. Now let me tell you how Donald Trump responded. Trump called Ashli Babbitt's death an execution. He said she was murdered. He hosted her family at Mar-a-Lago for a personal meeting. He demanded the officer's name be released publicly. He demanded the officer be prosecuted. For years after January 6th, Trump repeatedly invoked Ashli Babbitt's name. Remember Ashli Babbitt, he would say at rallies. She was murdered. The officer should face charges. She deserves justice. The MAGA movement built shrines to her. They created memorials at the Capitol and around the country. They made pilgrimages to visit these shrines. They called her an innocent victim. They called her an unarmed protester. They called her a patriot. They made her a symbol of government tyranny. Justice for Ashli became a slogan, a movement. Republican members of Congress echoed these demands. And years later, the MAGA movement still invokes her name as a martyr who died fighting for truth. So, according to Donald Trump and the MAGA movement, Ashli Babbitt was an innocent victim who was murdered by a federal agent. She was a martyr who deserves justice. The officer should be prosecuted, and her death proves government tyranny. Now let's be very clear about what we're comparing here. Ashli Babbitt was literally breaking through a barricaded door during a violent attack on the United States Capitol. She was part of a mob that injured over 140 police officers that day. She was trying to reach members of Congress who were being evacuated. The officer defending that last barrier gave warnings. She ignored them and climbed through anyway. The Department of Justice investigated and determined the shooting was justified, and Donald Trump called it murder. He hosted her family. He demanded prosecution. He made her a martyr. Renee Nicole Good was sitting in her car during a traffic stop. She was monitoring ICE activity, exercising her First Amendment rights. The ICE agent casually walked around her car while filming on his cell phone. Experts who specialize in use of force say his behavior appears inconsistent with genuine threat perception. When Good started to drive, the 3D analysis shows she turned her steering wheel away from the agent, not toward him. The agent shot her while still holding his phone in his other hand. According to expert assessment, the behavior documented in the video raises serious questions about the justification. The mayor who watched the video called the federal claims bullshit, and Donald Trump called her a terrorist. He said she viciously ran over the agent. He justified the shooting as self-defense. Do you see the difference? It's not about the facts. It's not about what actually happened. It's about politics. Ashli Babbitt supported Donald Trump. She was attacking the Capitol to try to stop the certification of an election Trump lost. So when she was shot, she's a martyr who deserves justice. Renee Nicole Good was monitoring ICE. She was observing federal agents during Trump's mass deportation operations. So when she was shot, she's a terrorist who got what she deserved. The facts are inverted. Babbitt was objectively more threatening. She was part of a violent mob. She was breaking through a barrier. She was advancing toward members of Congress. The officer gave warnings. She ignored them. The investigation found the shooting justified. But according to MAGA, she was murdered. Good was objectively less threatening. She was sitting in her car. The agent was so unconcerned he was filming with one hand. Experts say his casual behavior appears inconsistent with genuine fear for his life. She turned away from him. But according to MAGA, she was a violent terrorist who viciously attacked the agent. This tells you everything you need to know about whether MAGA actually cares about police accountability. They don't. They don't care about government violence. They don't care about due process. They don't care about the facts. They care about power. If you serve their political interests, you're a hero. If you attack the Capitol for Trump, you're a martyr who deserves justice. If you don't serve their interests, you're a terrorist. If you monitor ICE, you're a violent criminal who got what you deserved. And this is why Kristi Noem is blocking Congress from investigating what happened to Renee Good. This is why the FBI revoked Minnesota state investigators' access to evidence. This is why they're hiding. Because if people actually examine the facts, if Congress gets to inspect the facility and interview witnesses and review the evidence, the questions raised by Ross's video and the expert assessments would be central to any investigation. The video already shows Ross filming himself while shooting. Experts already say his behavior is inconsistent with threat perception. The mayor already called it bullshit. An independent investigation would examine these contradictions, and preventing that examination appears to be the priority. With Ashli Babbitt, MAGA demanded investigation. They wanted full transparency. They wanted the video released for public analysis. They wanted the officer questioned about his name, his actions, his justification. They demanded accountability for years. They still demand it, because a real investigation into Babbitt's shooting shows the officer was justified protecting members of Congress from a violent mob, and that's politically inconvenient for MAGA. So they ignore the investigation's findings and demand more investigation, hoping eventually to get a different answer. With Renee Good, MAGA blocks investigation. The FBI blocked Minnesota's state investigators from accessing evidence. Nome blocked 3 congresswomen from conducting oversight at the Minneapolis ICE facility. DHS is stonewalling. No transparency. Because an independent investigation would examine Ross's own video showing him filming with one hand, and expert assessments questioning the justification. That examination could produce findings that are politically inconvenient for MAGA, so they block investigation, control the narrative, and prevent independent oversight. The pattern is clear. MAGA demands investigation when it helps them politically and blocks investigation when it hurts them politically. They demanded accountability for the officer who shot Babbitt during a violent attack on the Capitol. They defend the agent who shot Good while filming with his cell phone. The only difference is whose side these women were on. Now, conservatives will make some predictable arguments. They'll say this comparison is whataboutism, that I'm deflecting from the facts of Renee Good's case by bringing up Ashli Babbitt. But I'm not deflecting. I'm directly showing MAGA's hypocrisy on police accountability. The pattern of how they respond to similar situations reveals whether they have actual principles or just political convenience. They've been invoking Ashli Babbitt for years, demanding justice for her. They're now defending what happened to Renee Good. I'm comparing their positions. That's not whataboutism. That's pattern recognition. They'll say Ashli Babbitt was unarmed, and that's true. She didn't have a weapon, but she was part of a violent mob that injured over 140 officers that day. She was breaking through the last barrier between that mob and members of Congress. The officer warned her. She ignored the warning. The context was a violent insurrection attacking the seat of government. The investigation found the shooting justified. Renee Good was also unarmed. She was sitting in her car. The agent was filming her with one hand. Experts say his behavior proves he didn't perceive a threat. So if being unarmed matters for Babbitt, it matters for Good. But MAGA calls Babbitt a martyr and Good a terrorist. They'll insist that Renee Good really was driving at Ross, that the video proves it, that experts are wrong or biased. But CNN's 3D analysis shows Good turned her steering wheel away from Ross, not toward him. Ross positioned himself in front of the car. He created the situation. And then he shot her while still filming. 2 professors, one specializing in criminology and use of force, one specializing in law and self-defense doctrine, both independently concluded Ross's behavior appears inconsistent with genuine threat perception. The mayor of Minneapolis watched the video and called the federal claims bullshit. So the claim that Good was attacking Ross is contradicted by the evidence, the expert analysis, and the local officials who reviewed the footage. They'll claim Ashli Babbitt wasn't trying to kill anyone, that she was just a protester, that she had no weapon, that the officer overreacted. But the mob she was part of was chanting "Hang Mike Pence." They were hunting for lawmakers. She was advancing through the last barrier toward members of Congress who were being evacuated. The officer's perspective was that he was protecting those members from a violent mob that had just broken through a barricaded door. The investigation agreed. The shooting was justified. But MAGA wants you to ignore all of that context and focus only on the fact that Babbitt herself didn't personally have a gun in her hand at that specific moment. And they'll say I'm being hypocritical. that I'm defending one shooting and condemning another, just like I'm accusing them of doing. But here's the difference. I'm consistent. I support accountability and investigation for all incidents where police or federal agents use lethal force. The Babbitt shooting was investigated. The Department of Justice reviewed the evidence and the context and determined it was justified based on the officer defending Congress from a violent mob breaching the last barrier. I'm not demanding that investigation be ignored or blocked. The Good shooting is being blocked from investigation. The FBI revoked state access. Noem blocked Congress. But experts who have reviewed Ross's video say his behavior appears inconsistent with lawful self-defense. I'm asking for the same thing in both cases. Transparent investigation that follows the evidence. MAGA does the opposite. They demand investigation for Babbitt even after one cleared the officer, and they block investigation for Good specifically to prevent evidence from being examined. That's not consistency. That's selective accountability based on politics. What this exposes is the authoritarian logic at the heart of MAGA. This isn't about right versus wrong. This is about friend versus enemy. There's a political theorist named Carl Schmitt who described how authoritarian movements think. They don't operate on universal principles. They operate on the friend-enemy distinction. For me, everything. Against me, the law. If you're on our side, you can do no wrong. If you're against us, you deserve whatever happens to you. Double standards aren't a flaw in this system. They're a feature. Ashli Babbitt was a friend. She was attacking the Capitol for Trump. She was trying to stop the certification of an election Trump lost. Therefore, any violence against her is wrong. It doesn't matter what she was doing. It doesn't matter that she was part of a violent mob. It doesn't matter that she broke through a barrier. It doesn't matter that an investigation found the shooting justified. She was on their side, so she must be defended. Renee Good was an enemy. She was monitoring ICE. She was observing federal agents during Trump's mass deportation operations. Therefore, any violence against her is justified. It doesn't matter that she was sitting in her car. It doesn't matter that the agent was filming with one hand. It doesn't matter that experts say the shooting was not justified. She was opposing them, so she must be condemned. This is how authoritarianism works. And this is why you can't reason with this movement using facts and evidence. They're not operating on logic. They're operating on power. The facts are irrelevant. The narrative serves political goals. Showing them the contradiction doesn't change their minds because the contradiction is the point. The selective application of standards demonstrates power. We can declare this person a martyr and that person a terrorist based solely on political alignment, and there's nothing you can do about it. But here's what this comparison does. It exposes them to persuadable people, to people who might be on the fence, to people who hear MAGA talking about police accountability and think maybe they have a point. This side-by-side comparison shows they don't have a point. They have a team. And if you're not on their team, they don't care what happens to you. Ashli Babbitt attacked the United States Capitol. She broke through a barricaded door. She ignored warnings from an officer protecting members of Congress, and MAGA made her a martyr. Renee Nicole Good sat in her car monitoring ICE activity. An agent filmed himself shooting her. Experts say it wasn't justified, and MAGA called her a terrorist. The only meaningful difference between these two cases is political alignment. That's it. That's the only variable that determines whether MAGA demands justice or justifies violence. So the next time you hear Donald Trump or anyone in the MAGA movement demanding accountability for police violence, ask yourself, do they actually mean it? Or do they only care when it's politically convenient? The Ashli Babbitt comparison gives you the answer. They demanded investigation and accountability for years when a Capitol police officer shot someone attacking Congress. But they're blocking investigation and defending the agent when ICE shot someone sitting in a car. Same government, different victims, opposite responses. Because it was never about principles. It was always about power. Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota proclaimed January 9th as Renee Good Day. The state is honoring a woman the Trump administration calls a terrorist. Becca Good said they had whistles and the federal agents had guns. That simple statement captures everything. Renee Good was exercising her constitutional rights. She had a whistle. The agent had a gun and a cell phone, and he chose to use both. The facts don't support NAGA's narrative. The video doesn't support it. The expert analysis doesn't support it. The 3D model doesn't support it. The mayor who watched the footage doesn't support it. But none of that matters, because this was never about facts. This was always about whether you're on their side or not. That's the lesson of the Ashli Babbitt and Renee Nicole Good comparison. MAGA has no principles. They have teams. And the sooner everyone understands that, the sooner we can stop pretending their arguments are made in good faith.
Thanks for spending a few minutes digging into this with me. If you want more grounded, progressive commentary without the outrage bait, subscribe and stick around. Every time you watch, share, and engage, it helps build a community that believes democracy is worth understanding and defending. I'll see you in the next video.